I sacrificed my best friend at a company party for a cheap laugh, and now my world is falling apart. You know that feeling when you're in a room full of people who are shinier and more successful than you, and the air is so thick with ambition you can barely breathe? That was me last Saturday at the annual corporate gala for Sterling Solutions. It was held in one of those soulless hotel ballrooms with chandeliers that cost more than my car and carpets designed to hide wine stains. I'd only been with the company for 6 months, and I was vibrating with a toxic cocktail of cheap champagne and crippling insecurity. My boss, Mark, was holding court at our table. He's one of those guys who exudes a kind of effortless, predatory charm. Everyone was hanging on his every word as he told some story about his early days, sleeping on a friend's floor. The theme, as always, was grit. And that's when the worst idea I've ever had in my entire life slithered into my brain. It felt brilliant at the time, a perfect, sparkling little gem of an idea. A way to connect with him, to show them all that I wasn't just some new hire, that I had grit too. I had a story about hitting rock bottom. Next to me, Alexis squeezed my hand. She was my plus one, my best friend, my everything. She'd seen me through that rock bottom. She probably thought I was just nervous, overwhelmed by all the corporate schmoozing. She gave me that small, steady smile that had always been my anchor. She had no idea that I was about to take that anchor and smash our entire friendship to pieces with it, just for a moment in the spotlight. I smiled back, took a deep breath, and waited for the perfect pause in Mark's monologue. Alexis wasn't just my friend. She was the architect of my current life. That's not an exaggeration, and it feels like acid in my throat to admit it now. 2 years ago, I wasn't Serena from Sterling Solutions, nervously sipping champagne. I was just Serena, a ghost haunting a shoebox apartment, surrounded by packing boxes I had no energy to fill. My world had imploded in a spectacular, cliché fashion. A brutal layoff, a breakup that followed because my ex needed someone stable, and a final eviction notice taped to my door that looked like a death certificate for my life in the city. I was calling my parents, the shame so thick I could barely speak, preparing to move back into my childhood bedroom at 28. Then I called Alexis, not for a solution, but for a final, desperate cry. An hour later, she was at my door. She didn't knock. She used the key I'd given her ages ago. She stood there in the doorway, taking in the scene, me, wrapped in a dirty blanket on the floor, the threatening red ink of the notice, and her expression wasn't pity. It was determination. She had her beat-up Honda, 2 empty suitcases, and a roll of packing tape. She didn't ask, she told me. "You're moving in with me. We'll figure it out." Figuring it out meant me occupying her lumpy, floral-patterned pull-out couch for the next 7 months. Her apartment was a tiny one-bedroom she could barely afford on her nonprofit salary. My unemployment checks were a joke, barely covering my student loan payments. But she never once made me feel like a burden. She'd come home from her exhausting job, see me still in my pajamas, and instead of judging, she'd just declare it a cozy dinner night, splitting her instant ramen with me and adding a fancy egg to mine. She'd leave sticky notes on the bathroom mirror with job postings, but also messages like, "You're a rock star. They'd be lucky to have you." Or, "Remember that time we tried to bake that cake and set off the fire alarm? We survived that. We can survive this." Her loyalty was a physical presence in that tiny apartment. It was in the way she'd quietly pay for my transit pass when my account was overdrawn. It was in the expensive blazer she insisted on buying me for an interview, using money I knew she was saving for a new laptop. "You have to look the part to feel the part," she'd said, her eyes shining with more pride than I felt for myself. She was my cheerleader, my financial advisor, my therapist, and the only reason I bothered to get off that couch. She believed in me with a ferocity I couldn't comprehend, patiently waiting for me to catch up to the version of myself she saw so clearly. The job at Sterling Solutions? She found the listing. She stayed up with me until 3 a.m. the night before the final interview, role-playing as the stern hiring manager, grilling me on company stats until I had them memorized. Getting that offer letter was a victory for us. We celebrated with the fanciest pizza we could afford, eating it on the floor of her living room. And now, here I was, at the gala celebrating that very success, with her right by my side. She was the foundation on which this entire new life was built. A foundation I was about to dynamite for a round of applause. Mark finished his story with a self-satisfied smirk, and the table erupted in polite, appreciative laughter. He raised his glass. "To humble beginnings," he toasted. Everyone echoed him. As the murmur died down, I saw my opening. It was perfect. "That's so true, Mark," I said, my voice a little too loud. All heads turned to me. Adrenaline, sharp and intoxicating, surged through me. Humble beginnings really do shape you. Mark raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "You got a story for us, Serena." "Oh God, do I?" I laughed, a brittle, practiced sound. 2 years ago, I was basically a charity case. I glanced at Alexis, expecting her to play along, to give me a little eye roll of solidarity. Instead, her smile was tight, a flicker of confusion in her eyes. I ignored it. I was on a roll. "I was so broke," I continued, leaning into the center of the table, making it a performance. I mean, hilariously broke. I was living on my best friend's couch. I gestured dramatically towards Alexis, who looked like a deer caught in headlights. And bless her heart, she was my own personal, one-woman soup kitchen. A few people chuckled. It was working. I remember one time I had this huge interview for this job, actually, and I had nothing to wear. Absolutely nothing. Alexis, being the saint that she is, takes me shopping. I paused for effect. She marches me into this department store and buys me this blazer. I started to laugh, a high-pitched, performative giggle. It was this polyester thing, probably cost $20, and it was the most serious, earnest purchase of her life. She looked at me like she was knighting me for battle. I stood up slightly and mimicked a stiff, awkward posture, puffing out my chest. She put it on me and said, and here's where I made the fatal, unforgivable mistake. I changed my voice, pitching it higher, making it sound naive and a little pathetic. "Serena, this blazer is an investment in your future. It radiates competence." The table roared. Mark threw his head back and laughed, a loud, booming sound that was like a drug to me. I had done it. I had captured his attention. I was in. In that moment of triumph, I looked at Alexis. The color had drained from her face. She was staring at her hands, folded in her lap, her knuckles white. The hurt in her eyes was so profound, so naked, it was like a physical blow. She wasn't just embarrassed, she was shattered. I had taken her purest act of love and loyalty, a sacrifice she had made for me, a belief she had in me, and I had twisted it into a punchline for these strangers. I had held up her heart for them to laugh at, and I had led the laughter. The blazer she bought me wasn't just a piece of clothing. It was a symbol of her unwavering faith. And I had just told a room full of people that her faith was cheap, clumsy, and laughable. I was still basking in the warm, stupid glow of their laughter when Alexis pushed her chair back. The sound was quiet, a delicate scrape of wood on the polished floor, but in my head, it was a gunshot that silenced everything else. She stood up, her movements unnaturally calm and precise, as if she were moving through water. She smoothed down a non-existent wrinkle on her dress, a dress I'd helped her pick out just last week. "Excuse me," she murmured, her voice so low it was almost a whisper, directed at no one in particular. She didn't look at me. She couldn't. I think if she had, the raw, unfiltered pain in her eyes would have incinerated me on the spot. She just turned and walked away, her back perfectly straight, weaving through the crowded tables with a quiet dignity I had just proven I didn't possess. For a split second, a battle raged within me. The decent part of me, the part that still remembered who I was, screamed at me to get up. Go after her. Throw down your napkin, mumble an apology to the table, and run. Fix this. Now. But then Mark, my boss, the man I had just sold my soul to impress, clapped me on the shoulder. His hand felt impossibly heavy. "That's a hell of a story, Serena. Radiates competence." I'm gonna use that. A few others at the table chuckled again in agreement. And just like that, the battle was over. My cowardice, my pathetic, desperate need for a pat on the head from these people won. I let her go. I sank back into my chair and gave a weak, shaky laugh. I convinced myself she was just being sensitive, that she'd gone to the restroom to cool off and compose herself. "She'll be back in 5 minutes," I told myself, a frantic lie repeated on a loop in my brain. "We'll have a quiet word. I'll apologize, and it'll be fine. For the rest of the night, I played the part, laughing at jokes I didn't find funny and nodding along to conversations I barely heard. But a cold dread was seeping into the edges of my drunken haze, a growing certainty that I had just detonated a bomb and was simply waiting for the shrapnel to hit me. The next morning, I woke up with a pounding headache and a gut-wrenching sense of shame that was more debilitating than any hangover. The memory of her face, pale and utterly wounded, crashed down on me with physical force. I grabbed my phone, my thumbs fumbling, slick with sweat. I typed out a frantic, rambling apology. "Lex, I am so sorry about last night. There's no excuse. I was a complete idiot and I'm disgusting. Please let me make it up to you. Breakfast, anything." Before I could even hit send, a notification popped up. A single message from her, delivered with the impersonal chill of a bank statement. It wasn't an angry tirade. It wasn't a tearful accusation. It was so much worse. It was calm, clinical, and final. The message read, "Serena, what you did last night was a public and complete betrayal of our friendship. I cannot have someone in my life who would use my support as a punchline for personal gain. I will not be a stepping stone for your ambition. Do not contact me again. I wish you well." That was it. I read the words over and over, my blood turning to ice. I wish you well. It was the cruelest part, a corporate sign-off for a decade of friendship. It was the detached pity you'd offer a stranger. I immediately tried to call her. The phone didn't even ring. It went straight to a generic voicemail message. My heart hammered against my ribs. I opened Instagram to send her a desperate, pleading DM. I typed her name into the search bar. User not found, my breath hitched. Facebook, gone. WhatsApp. My last message to her had a single gray tick. She hadn't just blocked me. She had methodically, systematically, erased every trace of me from her digital life. In a few calm, deliberate clicks, she had performed a surgical excision. No mess, no drama, no screaming match, just a clean, programmatic severance. The silence from Alexis was a deafening roar that followed me everywhere. At first, I thought I could weather it. I told myself she just needed space. She'd cool down. She had to. But the cold reality of my new, Alexis-less world began to set in on Monday morning. I walked into the office expecting, I don't know what, a promotion, a knowing nod from Mark. Instead, the atmosphere felt different. Chilly. People who usually stopped by my desk for a quick chat just gave me a tight, brief smile and hurried past. The easy camaraderie I thought I was building had vanished. At lunch, I sat down at a table with a few colleagues from my team, and the conversation immediately died. They picked at their salads, talking about the weather, their words clipped and awkward. The gala wasn't mentioned. My hilarious story wasn't mentioned. It was like a dead body was lying on the table that everyone was pretending not to see. The breaking point came on Wednesday. I saw Megan from marketing by the coffee machine. We weren't close, but we'd always been friendly, complaining about deadlines and sharing weekend plans. I gave her a bright, "Hey, how's it going?" She flinched, genuinely startled, before schooling her features into a mask of politeness. "Oh, hey, Serena." "Fine." She couldn't look me in the eye. "Weird vibe in the office this week, right?" I tried, forcing a laugh. Megan busied herself with adding an obscene amount of sugar to her coffee. She hesitated, and for a second I thought she was going to blow me off. But then she sighed, a heavy, weary sound, and finally looked at me. There was no malice in her eyes, just a kind of weary pity. "Look, Serena," she said, her voice low. "I probably shouldn't be telling you this, but people are talking about what happened at the party." My stomach plummeted. "What are they saying?" "It's just Mark mentioned it, at the managers' meeting on Monday." She took a deep breath. "He was talking about team loyalty, and he said something like, if someone's willing to sell out their best friend for a cheap laugh, what do you think they'll do when the pressure is really on?" He didn't use your name. He didn't have to. The words hit me like a physical slap. The very thing I did to gain his approval had become the reason for his contempt. My desperate, clumsy attempt to show him I had grit had instead shown him that I had no integrity. I wasn't the savvy operator I thought I was portraying. I was a liability, a backstabber. The laughter I had won that night wasn't applause. It was the sound of my own professional execution. I had tried so hard to get a seat at the table, and in one spectacularly stupid move, I had branded myself as the one person they could never, ever trust. The isolation wasn't just in my head anymore. It was real, it was systematic, and it was just beginning. And so now I sit here in my apartment, the one she helped me find. The cheap IKEA bookshelf in the corner. We built that together, fueled by cheap wine and arguing over the instructions. I scroll through the photos on my phone, the ones she forgot to untag herself from on some shared cloud I still have access to. There we are, 5 years ago, goofy smiles and bad haircuts. There we are on her couch, the night I got the job offer, pizza boxes on the floor, her arms slung around me in victory. I know what I did was wrong. I'm not an idiot. But a part of me, the pathetic, screaming part, still doesn't understand how it all fell apart so completely, so quickly. It was just a stupid story. A bad joke. Do people really throw away a decade of friendship over one bad joke? I've drafted 100 apologies in my notes app. Each one sounds more pathetic than the last. It doesn't matter anyway. I have nowhere to send them. I got what I wanted that night. I got the laugh. I got the attention. I got a seat at the table. But the seat is cold and empty, and the silence in this apartment is the only thing answering me back. How did I not see that she was the only thing that was ever real? How did it come to this?